Welcome to our lesson number 2. It is all about the communication process. Good day, my dear students. I will be discussing a topic in our subject oral communication. But before that, I want to introduce myself. I am your teacher for today. I am Miss Carol Michelle Ignacio. We have a target goal for today's lesson. The students should be able to, first, identify the stages in the communication process. Second, value the importance of effective communication. And lastly, interpret the quotations about communication. Before we go straight forward to our discussion, I have a question from you. Do you have any idea when you heard the word communication? How do you communicate to your friends? Is communication important? Well, we will know more about that. Well, going back with our first question, what is communication? Well, the term communication is derived from the Latin word communicare, which mean to share. Okay? So, communication is the act or process of using words, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange of ideas, informations, and feelings. So communication is an opinion that is transmitted with the intent of creating a shared understanding. In communication, there are what we called the stages in communication process. Now, there are 7 stages of communication process. The first one is what we call the sender, going down to encoding, message, channel, receiver, decoding, and here you can see the feedback. So, the very first stages in communication process is what we called the sender. Now, the sender or the communicator is the person who initiates the conversation and has conceptualized the idea that he intends to convey to others. So, meaning, the sender is an individual, group, or organization who initiates the communication. This source is initially responsible for the success of the message. The sender's experiences, attitudes, knowledge, skill, perceptions, and culture influence the message. So after the sender, we are going down to encoding or encoder. So in order to convey meaning, the sender must begin encoding, which means translating information into a message in the form of symbols that represent ideas or concepts. This process translates the ideas or concepts into the coded message that will be communicated. The symbols can take on numerous forms such as language, words, or gestures. These symbols are used to encode ideas into messages that others can understand. So, it is very important for the sender to use symbols that are familiar to the intended receiver. It is also a good way for the sender to improve encoding their message. It is to mentally visualize the communication from the receiver's point of view. Now, after the encoding, the next one is what we called the channel, or also called a medium. Now, the channel is the means used to convey the message. Most channels are either oral or written, but currently visual channels are becoming more common as technology expands. Common channels includes the telephone in a variety of written forms such as memos, letters, and reports. The effectiveness of the variation channels fluctuates depending on the characteristic of the communication. For example, when immediate feedback is necessary, oral communication channels are more effective because any uncertainties can be cleared up on the spot. Like in a situation where the message must be delivered to more than a small group of people, written channels are often more effective. Well, although in many cases, both oral and written channels should be used because one supplements to another. After the appropriate channel or channels are selected, here is what we called the receiver. So the receiver is the individual or individuals to whom the message is directed. The extent to which this person comprehends the message will depend on a number of factors, which includes the following: how much the individual or individuals know about the topic, their receptivity to the message, and the relationship and trust that exists between sender and receiver. Well, all interpretations by the receiver influenced by their experiences, attitudes, knowledge, skills, perceptions, and culture. It is similar to the sender's relationship with encoding. Now we are done with the receiver. The message enters the decoding stage of communication process. Once the message is received and examined, the stimulus is sent to the brain for interpreting in order to assign some type of meaning to it. It is this processing stage that constitutes decoding. The receiver begins to interpret the symbols sent by the sender, translating the message to their own set of experiences in order to make the symbols meaningful. Successful communications takes place when the receiver correctly interprets the sender's message. We are now on the final link in the chain of the communication process. It is what we called the feedback. So the feedback is a key component in the communication process because it allows the sender to evaluate the effectiveness of the message. Feedback ultimately provides an opportunity for the sender to take corrective action to clarify a misunderstood message. Feedback plays an important role by indicating significant communication barriers, differences in background, different interpretations of words, and differing emotional reactions. So after receiving a message, the receiver responds in some ways and signals that responds to the sender. The signal may take the form of a spoken comment, long sigh, a written message, Now, I prepare here an exercises in which you are going to interpret the quotations about communication. So as you can see on the slide, I have two quotations there. The first one is, good communication is just as stimulating as black coffee and just as hard to keep after. It is said by Anne Marrow Lindbergh. The second quotation is that the most important thing in communication is to hear what is not being said, by Peter Drucker. Now, in this particular exercises, I want you to interpret the quotation based on your understanding with the means of the communication. Did you understand? Okay, well then very good.